And welcome to UUCC, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. We are a group of spiritual free thinkers who gather to celebrate life, build community, and better the world. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. I'm Jill Poremba, your worship associate for this morning, and the service today will be led by our minister, Eileen Casey Campbell. Thank you to everyone on this morning's worship team, also including music by Bill Mells in your children's church for children 3 and over by Lynn, Kaya, and Fiona. If this is your first visit, welcome. We invite you to sign the visitor's book in the entryway. And whether it's your first visit or your 1000th, we are glad that you came. This service is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel. We will plan on continuing with hybrid worship services throughout the church year, so you can join us each week here in person, on Zoom, or later on YouTube. To help us connect better with our friends watching from home, please turn around and give a wave to the camera. At the end of the service, we will invite our friends on Zoom to turn their cameras on and return the wave. I have a few announcements to share with you today. If you have a joy or a sorrow to share, please fill out the card on your chair. We invite you to bring them forward and place them in the basket after Bill rings the chimes and begins to play. You can also come forward to drop a pebble in the water at that time if you have a joy or a sorrow that you'd prefer not to share. Every Sunday in December, including today, you will find crafts, arts, and gifts handmade by our members for sale after the service. All proceeds go to benefit the church's mission. This holiday season, we will plan to have a solstice service at 10 a.m. next Sunday, December 22nd, followed by our annual carol singing after the service. On December 24th at 4 p.m., we will celebrate Christmas with a musical nativity service and the opportunity for attendees of all ages to dress up and participate in the story. Our usual fourth Sunday meeting of the Social and Environmental Justice Committee will be moved to the fifth Sunday this month, December 29th, immediately following the service. We invite you to join in person or in Zoom on a breakout room. Once again, be on the lookout for suspicious emails that may impersonate our minister or our board members. They will never send you an email to ask for gift cards. Fiona Ross McGuire is collecting supplies for Mary's Place, a center that supports refugees. You can donate money or place hygiene items in the box. Are there any other announcements for the good of the community? Okay. As we prepare to be fully together, I remind you to silence your phones and devices. We now enter a space of worship. Now is the time to bring forward any joys or sorrows or come up to drop a pebble. Now it's time to light the chalice. Is Rory still? Oh, there he is. Rory is going to help us today. He's 8 years old. His favorite color is blue. He loves art. Thank you. I invite you to join with me in our chalice lightings as the flame is lit. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, and celebration of the life we share together.
This is a season of all kinds of joy and merriment and celebration, and also sometimes a fair amount of stress. Yeah, not just me. I will admit, in our family, we celebrate Christmas and we also celebrate the solstice, which happen within the same week. And I will admit that some years, maybe most years, even right up until this year, I have felt a lot of pressure. Let's put it this way. I have put a lot of pressure on myself to be perfectly and promptly prepared, to be decorated fully and beautifully and tidily for the holidays, to have gifts prepared and wrapped beautifully and set under the tree just so, to get a tree in a timely way and then decorate it in a way that looks like my kids didn't put every ornament in one little cluster at the bottom. Do you know what I mean? Have you been there? And this year I decided that I was going to let go of some of that. Not to let go of the preparation and the decorating and the gift giving per se, because I enjoy those things, but when there's so much pressure on them, I find them less enjoyable. So I decided I was going to take a lesson from Christianity as I celebrate this Christian holiday. Christmas in Christian tradition is a 12-day holiday, although most people celebrate it for pretty much just the one. And the season of preparation for Christmas is its own observance. Advent is a whole month of preparation, of wholly preparing for this celebration. And so I decided that the job of putting up the decorations or hand making the stockings or putting up a tree and putting all the lights on it and the bows and the ornaments, preparing gifts and wrapping gifts, those were going to be part of the joy for me. And they were going to take as long as they took, right up till Christmas Day. My husband in the back there can attest that there is a bowl of unstrung dried orange slices that I am working on, and I'll get around to, and bit by bit string them and hang them probably right up to or even after Christmas Day. And it's so much more joyful when I let go of the perfection and the promptness that I put on myself. The preparation became the celebration this year. I think sometimes the waiting is the best part. And I think sometimes that's why we come to church, isn't it? We come here to do the practice of preparing for the world that we long for. And that is the work, and it is the joy of this faith, the getting ready. And so would you get ready with me to sing our first hymn? I invite you to rise in your body or your spirit and sing together our first hymn, number 226 in the gray hymnal, People Look East. And now it's time for a story. It's not much of an acted out story today. There's just one main character. But if you're a small person or a big person and you want to have a chance to wiggle around and an excuse to come up front and hear the story a little better, you can move to the front and sit on the rug in front of the pulpit at any time during the story. And this is a story about Lu, who would become a king. But this is a story about before he was a king. And it comes from Vietnamese folklore. Now, Lu eventually became a king. And as a king, he was known for making the very best earth cakes and sky cakes for the New Year celebration that anyone in the land had ever tasted. And people wondered about why it was that he was able to make such perfect and delicious cakes for the New Year's altar. And I'm here to tell you why it was. So Lu was a prince when he was born, but he was born into a huge family. His father, the king, had many, many wives, as was the custom in that place and at that time. And Lu was born to one of his father's farther out wives, and I mean that literally. She lived far out in the countryside, and honestly didn't see much of the palace and royal life. She preferred a simpler life, Lu's mother. And so that's how Lu grew up, out in the countryside, next to the mountains and the rice paddies, in a beautiful setting that didn't feel very royal, but felt very special to Lu and his mother's heart. And he certainly didn't feel very connected to all the affairs of the palace or to the governance of the country, but he was a prince. And so when he became a young adult, a call went out. The king made a call to all of his many, 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 many sons and said, "My sons, I want you to cook something for the New Year altar. I want you to bring your very best dish to set upon the New Year altar as we celebrate the New Year." And Lu received this summons, just like all of his many brothers, and he was concerned. He didn't have very fancy ingredients way out in the countryside, and he didn't know all of the fancy and special and trendy ways of cooking and new dishes that people were trying in the city or around the palace. He didn't know what he would make. And even more importantly, Lu's mother had recently died, and so he was in a period of mourning. And he was troubled about what he could possibly bring to set on the altar beside all of these glorious dishes that he knew his brothers would be bringing. And he went to sleep worried about it. And that night, Lu had a dream. And in his dream, he saw his mother. And his mother didn't say much, but she said, "Lu, it doesn't have to be fancy. You have a good heart." And she reached one hand to the sky, and she reached one hand to the earth, and she smiled at him. And when Lu woke up, he had an idea. And so Lu went out into the fields, and he very carefully, with all of the care and thought that he could muster, spent the whole day gathering the very best grains of rice from the rice paddies outside his door. And he brought them home, and on the way, he picked the very greenest, springiest banana leaves. And he also picked up a pot of mung beans from his beloved neighbor in the countryside. And he cooked them together, and he spread the mung bean paste inside of a square of rice, and he very carefully folded the banana leaf around it, and he set it in a pot to steam. And then he took the rest of his rice, and he boiled up a pot of sweet, sticky rice, and then he mashed it into a paste. And then he lovingly shaped it into a round circle. The square of rice and mung bean paste steamed to represent the earth he walked on, and the round, sweet ball to represent the sky above. And he took these little rice cakes, and he packed them up, and he walked the long journey to the palace on New Year's Day. And he set them on the altar, and they were set next to these huge and glorious fancy dishes made with input from the finest chefs in the land, very intricately cut fruit in the shapes of birds and flowers and all sorts of beautiful lengthy cooked dishes that took days and days to make, and he felt a little afraid. But he remembered the dream of his mother smiling at him, and he thought, however it turns out, I know I have a good heart, and I'm happy with what I brought. And the king went down the altar on New Year's, and he tasted each dish that each of his many, many, many sons had brought. And when he got to Lou's, he tasted it, and he stood still for several minutes, looking very thoughtful. And then he went along his way, and then all of the sons went back to their homes. And a few days later, Lou received a summons from the king. And he went to the palace, and he stood before his father, who he'd only met a few times before. And he felt like maybe he was in trouble for bringing a not very fancy dish to put on the altar. And his father said, Lou, I could tell from the love you put into your rice cakes that you have a good heart. And I would like you to be the next king. And Lou was shocked, but in his good heart, he said, yes, I will, Dad. And that is how Lou became the king, and how the king became the best baker of rice cakes for the new year in the whole land. And that is the end of our story. Thank you for listening.
Now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts of both time and money support our church in its work. Each week, we would like to spotlight a group or committee and thank them for their gift of time. This week, the group is all of the creative people who donated crafts for the holiday sale. 1/4 of our plate collection for the darkness season will go to our service partner, Water for South Sudan, a registered national non-governmental organization in South Sudan. They are also a registered international NGO with an office located in Rochester. Water for South Sudan empowers communities to develop by implementing water, sanitation, and hygiene programs. New well drilling, well rehabilitation, hygiene education training, sanitation, and water storage and distribution. You can give to this morning's offering by placing a cash or a check into the basket, or by one of the options on your screen. Please make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering. We now gratefully accept the offering. We are a people of many joys and many sorrows. And in our celebrations and in our pain, we promise to one another, we are with you. Whatever you are holding in your heart this morning, you are not alone. We lift up these joys and sorrows this morning together. We celebrate with Kaya at her amazing new hair and gratitude for the friend who made it happen. And we hold the anxiety of a beloved for their son and daughter-in-law having difficulty being together. These and all the joys and sorrows that sit in the silence of our hearts, we hold together. We promise one another, we are with you. So as Jill drops a stone in the water, will you say it with me? We are with you. And now it's time for religious education. If you're heading to RE today, you can meet Kaya at the stairs.
invite you now into a time of centering and meditation, followed by some shared silence. We remember, as always, that by shared silence we mean the absence of grown-ups talking to one another so that we can listen more closely for the sounds of life. The birds and the trees outside the window, the wiggles and giggles of our children, the breath of the neighbor in the seat beside us, the beating of our own heart. I invite you to take a deep breath in. Let it out with a sigh. Let your shoulders fall away from your ears. Let your body be held by this good earth that made you. And just be here. This morning's meditation is adapted from a prayer by the Reverend Dr. Melanie Duguid-May. I invite you to be here, just now. Borders are walled and pathways are perilous, and still you step into a place of promise, just here, just now. May your memory be jolted, not only into stark realities, but into wild imaginings of what can be, here and now. Be here, just now. Here where we hear the groaning, moaning, mourning, just here, just now. May your anger, righteous and redolent of hope, rise up and stake a claim. May your grief, well deep and spring water sweet, flow and flow over a stream in desert places. May your joy, risky and rowdy, be born as a child is born. May love overflow from your being so persistently you are compelled to give it away. Be here, just now. In the rhythms of life, deep in dirt, under lunar lights and circling cosmic orbs, may the music of the spheres settle in marrow to be your mentor in ministries that hold and discomfort and transform and dance the divinity of mutually indwelling love. Be here, just now. Beloved ones, agitate. Be an agitator. Heal. Be healer of rhythms. So much is battered, broken upside down. Be brave and bold. Bold enough to be humble. Bold enough to give birth to love and give it away. Bold enough to hope for new heaven and new earth. Be blessed. Be blessing. Amen. This morning, I'm going to bring you inside the sacred circle of end-of-year church logistics. Just what you've been waiting for. Merry Christmas. The reality of preparing big holiday services is that liturgies for solstice and Christmas Eve usually need to be written or at least well outlined by early December, which means that we, your worship team, are almost always working on or already finished with the holiday services before this time in the season. And every year I struggle to decide what to preach about in mid-December when it seems like my attention, and everyone else's, is already centered on the upcoming holidays. And it turns out, when one looks at the 7 years of December sermons in my archives folder, which one did because one was casting about for any inspiration one could find, every year I basically preach some version of let this season be good enough to find the good in it. Let go of perfection that consumerism demands from us and let in the imperfect joy. And well, that summary could just be it for this morning, probably. But I do think that if I need reminding every year, maybe all of us do. Maybe we spend a little bit of time on that. I think what I've been doing, without explicitly saying I'm doing it, is engaging with the theology of Advent. And so I thought this year, why not do it explicitly? Probably because a bunch of us just got a little squeamish feeling in our bellies upon hearing the phrase, the theology of Advent. So content warning, I guess, for a people who most of us celebrate Christmas in our homes and who every year celebrate an observance of Christmas as a church and a denomination. This sermon contains some discussion of Jesus. I think if we actually do some unpacking of a UU theology of Christ, you're like, did she just say Christ in our pulpit? She did. If we talk about what preparing for Christmas means for us spiritually, we might find it less squeamish, not more so. To put everyone at ease, given the recent heresy of Jesus talk in a church, let's start with one of our favorite Christians, Mary Oliver. Because Mary Oliver can do no wrong, and even though she was Episcopalian, I think her writing does a very good job of summing up a UU Christology. That is, the question of who is Jesus and why do we care? So here is an Advent poem by Mary Oliver, which you've almost certainly heard me read before if you've ever been here around this time of year. She writes, "Dear Lord," right away, we would have scrubbed that from our hymnal 30 years ago and replaced it with word or spirit or love. But we're going to give it to her for important political theology reasons we'll come around to later. Dear Lord, I have swept and I have washed, but still nothing is as shining as it should be for you. Under the sink, for example, is an uproar of mice. It is the season of their many children. What shall I do? And under the eaves and through the walls, the squirrels have gnawed their ragged entrances. But it is the season when they need shelter, so what shall I do? And the raccoon limps into the kitchen and opens the cupboard, while the dog snores, the cat holds the pillow. What shall I do? Beautiful is the new snow falling in the yard, and the fox, who is staring boldly up the path to the door. And I still believe you will come, Lord. You will, when I speak to the fox, the sparrow, the lost dog, the shivering sea goose. Know that I am really speaking to you whenever I say, as I do all morning and afternoon, come in, come in. There are three main things that both Mary Oliver and the gospel writers of the nativity stories are telling us about love, I think. Love is material. It is transformative. And it is so very ordinary. And I do think it's important to start from the premise that the observance of Christmas, as well as the season of preparation for it, is a celebration centered on a story. a narrative that was crafted for a people under occupation by a harsh regime, a tale of what love can look like for a people without much hope to hang on to. A story that is not historical and not trying to be, but is true in the truest sense. I will assume you are marginally familiar with some version of the story of Jesus' birth that's present in some of the Gospels. If you're not, at our Christmas Eve service, you may hear a version of it. I also recommend my favorite interpretation of the Gospel Nativity, Linus's reading of Luke chapter 2 from A Charlie Brown Christmas. But we don't need to retell the whole thing this morning. The important thing to know is that none of these stories are trying to be journalism or history. They aren't trying to accurately convey the facts of what happened, which they would have done badly if they had been. They were all written about a full generation after Jesus had been born, started this movement, and then died. What they're trying to do is convey to the remnants of that movement a particular Christology, a story of who is Jesus and why do we care? A story of what is at the center of us. And so in the story of Christmas, we follow an unwed young mother who gives birth among cattle because she doesn't have a bed of her own. And then angels appear and announce with trumpets and fanfare that this barn baby, this nobody, poor homeless child in occupied Palestine, is a child of God. Power, these authors are insistent, as well as love, does not exist supernaturally. It's not concentrated in Rome or some heavenly realm, as Romans believed. It's made of the same stuff that we are. Love is material. It's of the earth. It's a baby in a barn. It's you and me. Love is born through pain and perseverance, and not metaphorically at all. It's part of our real and particular living bodies. It is the uproar of mice, the chilly squirrels in the eaves, the fox and the sea goose. It is the untidiness of a real home, a real life. Secondly, love is transformative. It disrupts the status quo. It disrupts power. So when Luke writes, or Linus recites, "This child is Lord," what he does is subvert the worship chant that was required of all the colonized by Rome, "Caesar is Lord." When the stories call Jesus a Prince of Peace, they do it as a purposeful perversion of the Pax Romana, the so-called peace of Rome. The initial readers knew this to be what Dr. King called a negative peace, the absence of tension because of the iron grip of empire, and not the presence of justice. It is an invitation to transformation of the very idea of peace as something that is not delivered by rulers, but lived out by regular folks. Love is transformative in that it is the absurdity of an invitation to the most unexpected guests. Dogs and foxes and raccoons, a welcome to the disruption of others' needs. To say to the homeless mother, be she mouse or human, "Come inside. There's room at this inn." And third, love is ordinary. However historical Jesus was born, the story of his birth has to be about being born homeless, helpless, the very least of these, right? Even the telling of a birth story at all. The humanizing of this symbolic figure is a way of reminding us that love isn't beyond us. There isn't actually a magical or otherworldly miracle in the story. A baby is born the same way all of us were, and that's the point. That world-saving, peace-bringing, justice-forging love can be born of any of us. That it's not spectacular, it's totally mundane, and it happens every day. Our Unitarian forebear, Sophia Lyon-Foss, was not being theologically radical when she wrote, "Every night that a child is born is a holy night." This is a love that's miraculous because it's ordinary, the stories tell us. And if we're looking for perfection or grandeur, we might miss the holiness of love in the mess of mice under the sink. So I figure, if Advent is the season of waiting and preparing for a love that is material and transformative and altogether ordinary, what is the practice of that? If we are waiting for the world we know is possible, waiting for a world that could be real, right here, and transformed by a love that does not leave out the regular folks, how do we prepare? And what do we do when it feels like that world is so far off, like it might never be realized? Well, I think first we stop seeking perfection and we do what's good enough. Because maybe we can't change the whole world at once, but we can feed some hungry neighbors. We can give blankets to a few shivering children. We can run for our school boards and our city councils. And here, if you think I don't mean you, she couldn't possibly mean me, I do. Please run for your school board. We can love one another in a way that cares for our real material needs. We can love one another in ways that transform all of us and disrupt that power structure of our world. We can love the ordinary, seemingly powerless people around us in ordinary, powerful ways. And in doing so, we remind ourselves that a small and vulnerable love for our neighbor is the most meaningful spiritual practice our faith calls us to do. And just as a reminder, you are already doing this preparation in the advent of a world we know is possible. Just yesterday, we co-sponsored a naming ceremony for our trans and genderqueer siblings with First Universalist and First Unitarian in Rochester. You sent me to help officiate, and your board has pledged some financial aid towards a trans legal aid fund that our three churches have started as well. And I got to stand before folks who have been subject to more than 754 pieces of legislation sponsored against their very being in just this last year. Like I stand before the holy children in our child dedications, like the shepherds stood before a baby in a barn and say their names out loud. You sent me there to tell these beloveds and to remind you, whenever you need it as well, you are whole and holy, exactly as you are. May you always be safe and be a place of safety for others. May you feel joy and bring joy to the world. May you love and be loved. The work of preparing for love is living as if it is right in front of us, and as if it is good enough. It is looking at the marginalized and vulnerable among us and saying, power and peace reside with you and not with the might of empire. Your becoming is a holy event. Every night a child is born is a holy night, which we remember, right, means every night, every moment on this beautiful and broken world is a holy moment. And readying ourselves for that holiness is the world as it should be. It is the work and the joy. I think, like doing the laundry or pulling weeds, we don't need to finish a task for it to be important. There is purpose and joy in doing what is in front of us and doing it good enough. We know the spiritual practice of preparing for the world we long for is not work we're going to finish. This is generational work. So it can be tempting to lose hope when it seems like we'll never see our preparations for love come to fruition. It can feel like our preparation for love is fruitless. But the preparing is the discipline and the joy. It is, for so many of our friends and neighbors, the salvation they needed. The promise of this season, the hope that actually has always been what we wait for, is that in the embrace of good enough, the small and the vulnerable, the disruptive, the ordinary, we find a goodness that is deeper and more real than any kind of perfection could offer. A goodness that is, indeed, enough. The theology of Advent is that love doesn't show up for perfection and power. Divinity is living in the margins, if it's anywhere, wrapped in rags, lying among cattle in a crowded house. Holiness isn't the pomp of empire, it is the vulnerability of a baby we didn't think would matter. It is the neighbor we weren't sure we wanted to invite in. I'll close this morning with a poem that I wrote for you all on the Sunday before Christmas in 2020. It was hard to believe in that season that the world we long for, the love we believe in, might ever be born. Particularly hard that year. But at the same time, we were doing the work of Advent. You all were sacrificing what you had known for the care of one another and the wider world. You were calling each other just to check in, dropping off non-perishable food on our porch for neighbors to pick up. You were giving in more generous ways than ever. It was good, and it was enough. Here's what I told you then, because I think it's still true today. God bless the good enough. In this season of cheer and merriment and all that joy and mirth and alleluia, sometimes showing up is the most we can muster. Amidst the lofty expectations for perfection, holiness, the glorias on high, sometimes making a bit of room at the inn is the best we manage. And birth in a barn will do. A food trough for a bed, a bit of rumpled paper, the half-assed lights, a store-bought cookie are good enough. And exalting the good enough, the making do, the God among the poor, the sick, the ordinary, it turns out, is blessing indeed. God bless the good enough. It is good, and it is enough. May it be so, and amen.
Well, I wanna be ready. Wanna be ready. I wanna be ready when joy comes back to me. I've been downhearted. Been downhearted. I've been downhearted, but I won't be down for long. I've been too long crying, too long crying, too long crying, but I won't cry anymore, 'cause I wanna be ready. Wanna be ready. I wanna be ready when joy comes back to me. Felt tied to the ground, Lord. Tied to the ground, Lord. Tied to the ground, Lord. But getting lighter every day. Spirit getting low down. Spirit getting low down. Spirit getting low sometimes, but I'm gonna rise. I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready when joy comes back to me. I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready when that joy comes back to me.
Bill Mells, am I right? I want to offer as a benediction these words from Madeleine L'Engle. We cannot wait till the world is sane to raise our songs with joyful voice. For to share our grief, to touch our pain, love is born. Rejoice, rejoice. Let us rejoice together. Will you rise in body or in spirit and sing together our closing hymn, number 1020 in the Teal hymnal, Wo Ya Ya.
If you are joining us on Zoom, now is the time to turn your camera on if you would like to wave goodbye. Please join me in our words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth.
The warmth of community, or the fire of commitment.
We carry in our hearts until we are together again.